Right, you saw that this test, when we tried to run it, it did fail. And that's because in here, this test, so we have a test for this interface, needs to connect to the H2 database. Now, anytime that you are unit testing your repositories, you need to use this annotation right here. So I'm going to say @ and then data JPA test. And this is the magic that will glue up everything, including auto wire the student repository, and you can see that the error went away, and also spin up the database for us. So let's actually, just for a second, let me just put a breakpoint in here, and I'm going to debug this. So we can debug, or I can just right click on the method and then debug. And now check this out. This is familiar, right? So you can see that if I go to log again, so I just want you to see that it actually connected to the database, and in here, this is actually paused. But if I inspect the under test right here, you can see that this is a JDK dynamic proxy and we can use it. So let me just stop this for a second. And then here, let me collapse this. Now, remember before this failed. So let's run the test again. So I'm going to click on the class and then run student repository test. And you can see that we have the familiar logging. And check this out. So let's have a look at the logs. So you can see that we have some logging, create table if exists. So this is because of this logging right here, this one show SQL. And to be honest, if you want, you can get rid of those because it's just noise on the console, but for testing it's absolutely fine. And you can see that we have create table, and then we have some shenanigans about the insert, and then this is our select exists method. So this is when it was invoked, and this is when the test ended. So it drop if exists, and you can see that our test did pass. So which is really cool, right? So let's now focus on testing. So now that we have things up and running and working, you can see that this test did pass. Now let's have a second test. Let's just duplicate all of this in here, Command C, and then I'm going to paste that, and in here it should check if student, and this name should actually be if student email and then exists. So that was a mistake there, and here it should check if student email and then does not and then exists. You can basically improve on the name of these methods, and this method right here, what it should do is, so let's just remove this save, right? So we're going to remove that save because we don't want to save anyone into the database. And here the expected is given this email, and then when select exists email, this should be false. So is false because there is no one with that email. There we go. So you can see that how easy it was for us to write a second test. So let's just run this one test. And you can see that this test did pass. Now, one thing that I want to do here is I want to have, so I'm going to press Control and then Enter. And here I'm going to say setup. And then here I want to say tear down. And then after each test, I want to say under test dot and then delete all. So I want to delete everyone. So after each test, I want to delete everyone, which means that for each test, we'll have a clean state. Now let's run all the tests in this class. And you can find all of this code under the description of this video. And there we go. You can see that we have 2 tests and they did pass. So they are doing what it's supposed to do. So this is really cool. Now, one thing that I want to mention is that the only reason why we are testing this student repository is because we have this method and this is our own custom method. So we wrote this SQL query, and it's important for us to test that our queries indeed work. But you see that, so if I go back in here, if I basically put my mouse anywhere, so here I can say under test dot, and then this has a bunch of other methods, right? So delete all, exists, find by ID, save, so on and so forth, right? All of these other methods, we don't have to test them because we didn't write any of that. And it's provided by Spring Data JPA, and it's already been tested. That's why they provide it to us as an API that we can use. So for those methods, there is no need for us to test them because it's given to us for free. The only methods that we have to test are the ones that we add in our interface. In our case, we tested that when we call this method right here. We tested both scenarios where the email exists and when the email does not exist. So it should check if student email does not exist, and then it should check if student, or actually, let's just say when. So naming things can be really difficult sometimes, but if or when, it's the same thing. So there you have it. Hopefully you now know how to test your JPA repositories. So it's really simple, and if you break down things with given, when, and then, it's a piece of cake testing your repositories. Next, let's go ahead and learn how to test the student service. And if you have any questions, please do let me know.